To her, I was just the assistant. No eye contact. No thanks. Years passed. Success came. And then, she walked in. Same heels. Same attitude. But now I was the one in charge. That was me for 3 straight months. Just some anonymous intern in a bland blue shirt with a clipboard and cold coffee in hand. My name is Jack. Back then, it might as well have been, "Hey you," or "Could you run to FedEx real quick?" I worked at a sleek marketing firm downtown. Polished floors, glass doors, fake plants, and fake people. Everyone dressed like they were waiting for a Vogue photographer to walk in. Everyone moved like they had purpose, except me. I hovered, lingered, waited for instructions like some forgotten backup dancer in a show no one was watching. And then there was her, Caroline Devlin, VP of Strategy. Walked like she owned the sky. Always wore these sharp navy suits, heels that clicked with precision, hair pinned up so tight it looked sculpted. She was probably in her mid-40s back then, but she moved like time bowed to her schedule. Her perfume lingered in rooms long after she was gone. Her words? Clipped, dismissive, final. Caroline never remembered my name. Not once. First week, I introduced myself twice. After that, I stopped trying. She called me intern, or just snapped her fingers when she wanted something. Coffee, reports, late-night copies. One time she asked me to pick up dry cleaning in a snowstorm and barely looked up from her monitor when I came back soaked to the bone. Once, I worked all night on a proposal deck for a pitch she was leading. 75 slides. I even caught a typo in the budget line and fixed it right before it went to print. She skimmed it during the meeting, smiled at the boardroom like she had pulled it together in a single breath, and said, "Glad my team pulled through." She never even glanced at me. There were small humiliations that stuck. The time she waved me away mid-sentence. The time I was told to grab food for a meeting and came back only to find they had started without me. My lunch was still sitting at my desk at 5 p.m., untouched. And that one time, I still remember this clearly, I tried to suggest a campaign idea. She looked at me for the first time in weeks and said, "Let's keep brainstorming to the people actually hired for strategy, all right?" I did not know why it got to me so bad. Maybe because I had always been the quiet kid, the helper, the one who worked hard, hoped someone would notice. Maybe I just wanted her to see I had a brain, that I was not just some coffee mule with decent handwriting. But she never did. When my internship ended, she shook my hand like she was shaking a receipt loose from her purse. "Good luck, Jeremy," she said. "My name is Jack." That day, I walked out of that glass tower with nothing but a used Metro card and a silent promise in my gut. One day, I would not just be noticed. I would be remembered. And the next time someone like Caroline Devlin saw me, it would not be from above. It would be across the table. After that internship, I swore I would never carry coffee for anyone again. Of course, that was not how it went. You do what you have to do to eat, and in my case, that meant temp gigs, part-time freelance work, and late-night contract jobs that paid in exposure and IOUs. I worked out of libraries, noisy cafes, and once even from a bus station while waiting to catch a ride back home because I could not afford rent that month. I taught myself everything I could get my hands on: SEO, design software, digital strategy, analytics. I stayed up watching free lectures and took every online course I could afford. Sometimes it was just me, a dying laptop, and a bag of gas station pretzels. There were days I felt like a fraud. Like all those people from the old office, Caroline and her crew had it right, that I would always be background noise. But then something started to shift. I landed a freelance gig for this tiny health food brand. They had no clue what they were doing online. I built them a campaign that tripled their online engagement. They sent me a gift card and a thank you note. Small win, but it lit something in me. Then came another client. Then 2 more. I started offering bundled services, copywriting, analytics, brand strategy. Word spread slowly. I was not making much, but I was building something, piece by piece. The turning point came when a mid-sized fitness company hired me to lead a full campaign rollout. Just me. No team, no safety net. I poured everything into that project: design, data, message, even the packaging mock-ups. And it worked. It worked better than they expected. They renewed, then referred me. And suddenly, I had a business. I called it Brick and Signal. Started out of my 1-bedroom apartment where the neighbors fought loud enough to make my walls shake. But that space, that little office I carved out near the window, became the place where I started writing my own story. I still doubted myself. Every time I signed a contract, every time I hit send on a proposal, I could hear Caroline's voice in the back of my head. Let's keep brainstorming to the people actually hired for strategy. But I kept going. By the time I was 30, I had 5 employees. By 32, we had an office. Not big, not fancy, but it was ours. Clients trusted us. Our work got noticed. And then, last month, my assistant buzzed in during lunch. Told me someone had sent in a resume for the strategy director position we had posted. I was halfway through a tuna sandwich. I asked for the name. She told me it was Caroline Devlin. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it felt impossible. Then she said, "She is here, by the way. Early, waiting in reception." I stood there, half a sandwich in my hand, heart pounding like I was 21 again, holding a tray of lattes. I walked out to meet her. She did not recognize me at first, but she would. She absolutely would. She stood up the second she saw me. Still sharp, still composed, but different somehow. There were small tells. A slight tremble in the fingers as she smoothed down her blazer. A split-second delay before she smiled, like her face had forgotten how. "Jack, was it?" she said, sticking out her hand. Her voice was calm, professional, like we were strangers. I shook it. Firm. Solid. No emotion. "That's right. Jack Holt, CEO." There was the first crack, barely visible. Her smile twitched. We walked through the office together. I pointed out the small kitchen space, the team huddled around the strategy board, the awards lined up on a floating shelf. She nodded politely at each one, saying all the right things. "This place has such energy. Really impressive layout. You built this from scratch." I just kept walking, letting the silence answer for me. We reached the meeting room. Glass walls, simple table, sunlight pouring in from the corner windows. She sat down first, folded her hands neatly in front of her, and waited for me to speak. But I did not. I just stared at her. She looked almost exactly the same as she had all those years ago. Perfect posture, makeup flawless, every word rehearsed. But something in her eyes gave her away. That tight, quiet panic of someone who realizes the story they have been telling themselves might not be true anymore. I picked up her resume and flipped through it slowly. Senior roles, advisory boards, a few consulting stints. But all of it pointed to one thing. She was not where she used to be. Somewhere along the line, the industry had shifted and she had not kept up. People like her used to own the room. Now, the room wanted something different. She cleared her throat. "I know I might be overqualified, but I am at a point in my career where I value collaboration and vision over title." I nodded like I was listening, but I was not thinking about her words. I was thinking about that time I stayed until 2 in the morning fixing her pitch deck after she dumped it on my desk with 0 instructions. I was thinking about the holiday party where I stood in the back while she introduced her key team and skipped right past me. I was thinking about the day I walked out of her office for the last time and swore I would never let anyone treat me like that again. She kept talking, trying to sell herself. Something about her leadership style, her track record, her commitment to growth. And still, I said nothing. Just watched her squirm, subtly, elegantly, but unmistakably, like a polished statue beginning to crack under heat. Finally, she paused. Her eyes flicked to mine. That was the moment. I saw it land. The memory. The recognition. She blinked, and her mouth parted slightly. "You interned at Bluestone, didn't you?" I let the silence hang between us like a held breath. Then I smiled. "Yeah," I said. "You used to call me Jeremy." Her face drained of color. She laughed, or tried to. One of those awkward, brittle sounds that dies before it fully forms. "Oh, right," she said, eyes flicking toward the table. Well, I had a lot of interns over the years. So many names. You know how it is." But I remembered. I remembered every room she walked into without once acknowledging me. Every pitch I helped build that she took credit for. Every time I stood by the printer at 10 o'clock at night, while her car waited downstairs with the heat running. She did not forget because there were too many of us. She forgot because people like me were never supposed to matter. I leaned back in my chair and let that truth settle in the air between us. She crossed her legs and smoothed the crease in her skirt, still trying to summon control, still clinging to the performance. "You built quite the company," she said, trying to recover. "I have been following your campaigns. That outdoor campaign for Corvus Fitness? Genius." I gave a small nod. "Thank you." I wanted to feel triumphant. Wanted to feel like this was the moment everything turned. But I didn't. Instead, I just felt tired. Not because I had power now, but because I finally saw her for what she really was. Not some towering force or unbeatable giant. Just another person too proud to look down and see the ones they stepped over. She shifted in her seat. I know this must be awkward, given our history. I let the pause stretch. You know, I said slowly, I used to think you were untouchable, like your opinion of me actually mattered. She opened her mouth, but I held up my hand. You do not need to say anything. She nodded, biting her lip now. I could tell she was bracing for it. For the humiliation. For me to remind her of everything she did. Of every slight. Every careless moment she thought I would forget. But I had no interest in revenge. Revenge is loud. And I learned to rise in silence. I stood up, walked to the door, and paused with my hand on the handle. Then I looked back. We will be in touch, I said. Our hiring manager will follow up. If we think there is a fit. Her lips parted again like she wanted to respond. Apologize, maybe. But I did not wait for it. I opened the door and stepped out, leaving her alone in that sunlit conference room, sitting across from the ghost of a name she never cared to learn. And behind me, I let the door close slowly, softly, but completely. I walked back to my desk with that strange mix of energy and stillness running through my chest, like adrenaline without movement. My team was still buzzing, phones ringing, laughter bouncing down the hallway. No one knew what just happened in that room, and I liked it that way. Control does not need an audience. I sat at my desk, checked the calendar, and saw 3 more back-to-back meetings lined up. I had not even touched my lunch. The sandwich sat half-eaten, warm now. I stared at it for a while, then pushed it aside. My phone buzzed. A message from our recruiter. She seemed shaken. Everything okay? I replied with 2 words, handled professionally. Then I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Not in victory, but in reflection. Because the truth? I never expected this. Sure, I told myself I would rise. I whispered promises into cracked mirrors and silent subway rides. I swore I would never be small again. But I never imagined this moment. The woman who used to walk past me like I was part of the wallpaper, sitting in my office, asking for a chance. It hit differently than I thought it would. Not like some epic comeback. Not like a scene from a movie. It was quieter than that. A shifting of gravity. A tilt in the earth. The part that surprised me most? I did not hate her. I thought I would. For years, I carried those tiny humiliations like stones in my pocket. I replayed her dismissals, sharpened them into drive. But now, watching her fold under her own weight, it just felt hollow. She was not a villain anymore. Just a person trying to catch up to a world that moved on without her. A knock on my door broke the silence. It was Leah, my director of strategy. She peeked in. You ready for the Sapien briefing? I nodded, grabbed my notes, and followed her down the hall. As I passed the glass conference room, I caught a final glimpse of Caroline. Still seated. Still alone. Looking down at her resume like maybe, if she stared hard enough, she could rewrite it. But some stories do not get rewrites. Some just come full circle. And this circle? It belonged to me now. That night, I stayed late. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to sit with it all. Let the noise settle. Let the weight lift. The office was quiet by 8. Just the hum of the vents and the glow from streetlights slipping through the windows. I looked out over the city, those same rooftops I used to walk beneath, broke and exhausted, wondering if it would ever be my turn. And now here I was, staring down at it all from the corner office. It did not feel triumphant. It felt earned. I opened an old file from a folder marked Intern Days. It was a deck I had built on my own time, one I pitched quietly to a manager who never forwarded it. I had titled it What They're Not Seeing. Crude design. Decent insight. But what hit me hardest was the note at the top of the first slide. Try to be useful. That was who I was back then. Not someone with vision. Just someone desperate to be seen as helpful. I closed the file. That guy is gone now. Just as I was packing up, my inbox pinged. A new message. Subject, thank you for your time today. It was from her. Caroline. No attachments. Just a short note. Jack, I know I was not a good leader to you. I did not see you clearly then, and it is obvious now that was my failure. Today was humbling in ways I cannot fully explain. But thank you for the courtesy, the professionalism, and the silence. I will not forget this version of you. CD. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I clicked archive. Not delete. Just archive. She had already taken enough space in my head. She did not need room in my inbox too. I grabbed my coat, shut off the lights, and walked out the door, not the intern exit on the back staircase, but through the front, past the glass logo, with my name etched in silver. Brick and signal. No one held the door for me. I held it for myself. 2 days passed before I heard the first whisper. Our HR director stopped by my office and asked, casually, if I had made a decision on the open strategy role. I told her I was still reviewing the final shortlist. She nodded, hesitated like she wanted to say more, then left. A few hours later, I heard her talking with someone in the break room. My name was not mentioned, but Caroline's was. Apparently, word was spreading. She had applied to our company. Some folks were shocked, others intrigued. A few asked if it was real. That was the thing about Caroline Devlin. Her name still carried weight in certain circles. People remembered her from the days when marketing campaigns revolved around her schedule and her voice could end meetings before they started. They did not know the version I knew. They did not remember the quiet ones in the room. One of our junior strategists, Naomi, popped in around lunch. She shut the door behind her. Can I be honest? I nodded. She sat down and said, people are talking. I mean the Caroline Devlin? Working here? Under you? I did not say anything. She kept going. Some think it would be a power move. Bring her on. Show the industry how far you've come. I leaned forward. Is that what you think? She paused. I think it would feel wrong. That was all I needed to hear. After she left, I opened Caroline's resume one last time. It was impressive. Still, despite everything, it had polish, experience, networks. But what it lacked was evolution. Everything on it screamed, I used to be important. Nothing said, I am learning. I am growing. And in my company, we do not build on memory. We build on momentum. Still, I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched now. Judged not just by her resume, but by how I would respond to it. Would I use the moment to humiliate her? Would I let ego steer the wheel? Or would I lead like the man I had always wanted to become? The inbox sat open. The decision was mine. Friday morning arrived heavy with expectation, even though no one said it out loud. 3 interviews were lined up for the strategy director role. Solid candidates. Bright minds with fresh ideas and the kind of hunger I respected, the kind I once had when I was grinding in dark cafes and using hotel lobbies for Wi-Fi. These were people ready to build something, not just polish what someone else already started. Caroline Devlin was not on the list. I had made that decision days earlier. Quietly, cleanly, without bitterness. I passed her resume back to HR with a short note. Not the right cultural fit. No dramatic explanation. No long-winded breakdown of history. Just a simple, steady decision. The kind you make when you no longer need to prove anything. But even after that, I kept expecting a ripple, a follow-up email, a second attempt to connect, maybe even a direct message with some excuse about how it was just a different time back then. Something to show she had processed what happened, what had flipped. But nothing came. Just silence, followed by an auto-reply from her email, out of office. Traveling. Of course. Still running. Still avoiding. I sat with that for a while. Around lunchtime, after the final interview wrapped up, I stayed behind in the glass conference room. The same room where she had once sat across from me. The light filtered through the blinds, casting quiet shadows across the table. Outside, traffic moved like always, fast, distracted, never pausing long enough to look inside. I thought about how far I had come, not just in title or bank balance, but in understanding. Because here is the truth. When you spend your life trying to be noticed and someone finally sees you, not as a helper or a background player, but as the one steering the ship, it changes everything. And when that person from your past returns, the one who never learned your name, the one who made you feel invisible, you do not need to crush them. That is the mistake people make. They think power is in revenge. But real power? Real power is in the silence. In saying no without explanation. In knowing you could swing the hammer. And choosing to set it down instead. Because you have already won. Not by stepping on their shoulders, but by walking your own road. I walked back to my office and closed the door. My reflection stared back at me from the window. Older, steadier, a man finally at peace with who he became. The Caroline chapter was over. It never needed an ending. Just a full stop. And that was mine. I thought that was the end of it. A clean break. Decision made. Life moves forward. But life, as I have learned, does not always respect the endings we try to write. Monday morning, just after 9, my phone rang. No name. Just a number. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. Jack. Her voice was quieter than I remembered. No edge. No performance. It was Caroline. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, letting the silence stretch long enough for her to feel it. I wanted to say something, she continued. I know I do not have the right to expect anything from you. But I remembered that internship. Eventually. Your face. The work you did. I did not say a word. I was never good at noticing the people who mattered, she said, voice cracking slightly. Back then, I was too busy chasing approval. Titles. Control. I thought that made me strong. She paused. But when I saw you the other day, it was like being hit with everything I had ignored. And I deserved it. There it was. Not groveling. Not a plea for the job. Just a moment of recognition. She went on, her words more scattered now. I do not want anything from you, Jack. I just needed to tell you that I remember now. I remember how I treated you. And I am sorry. I looked out the window. The city was waking up fast. Horns, brakes, voices rising like steam. But inside my office, it was still. Peaceful. I could have said 100 things in that moment. Could have reminded her of every time she ignored me. Could have rubbed it in. Could have let my pride speak for the boy I used to be. But I didn't. Because I am not that boy anymore. Instead, I took a breath and said the only thing that felt right. I appreciate the call. That was it. No fanfare. No resolution. Just a door finally closed, this time on both sides. After we hung up, I sat in that silence for a long time. Not because I was shaken, but because I was still. Still in the way you get when you know something big just ended without making a sound. Caroline was gone. Not just from the candidate list, but from my head. And for the first time since that internship, I no longer needed her to see me. Because I saw myself. A week passed. Then 2. Caroline never called again. No emails. No LinkedIn connection request. No sudden reappearance at industry events. She faded like a name from an old file. There, but irrelevant. And me? I kept building. The new strategy director started. A young woman named Andrea. Sharp. Unapologetically curious. She asked smart questions. She challenged ideas with respect. She reminded me a little of myself, years ago, before the world had tried to tell me I was only worth what someone else decided. One evening, I stayed late again. Habit, I guess. Old rhythms die slow. I sat alone in the office, watching the city pulse outside. People rushing home. Neon signs blinking in puddles. Everything moving forward. I opened an old document buried deep in our archives. Intern onboarding packet, draft 1. My notes were all over it. Back then, I had written down everything I wished someone had told me. Not about deadlines or file formats, but about value. About being seen. About how quiet work still matters. I had never shared it, but I had kept it. I printed it that night. Updated a few things. Then emailed it to HR and said, let's start giving this to the new hires. Everyone, intern or not. The reply came quick. Love this. Simple. Honest. Real. I smiled. Because that is what this was really about. Not revenge. Not getting even. But becoming the kind of leader I never had. Becoming the man who remembers names. Who looks people in the eye. Who listens when the quiet ones speak. The next morning, I walked into the office early. First one in, like always. Sunlight spilling across the conference room. Coffee brewing. Phone silent. I stood there for a moment and just breathed. This was mine. All of it. Not handed down. Not owed. Built. Brick by brick. Decision by decision. And as I stood in the doorway of that quiet, humming office, I realized the truth. The best part of the story is not that Caroline Devlin sat across from me one last time. It is that I did not need her to. I had already won. Because sometimes, the most powerful kind of success is the kind where no one claps. No one kneels. No one begs. Just you, standing in the room they once walked past. Holding the pen now. Writing your name. Slowly. Deliberately. And underlining it. Once. Firm. Final.